Hello everybody, welcome to the first Imposter Syndrome live stream. I am here. We are here to discuss what we are doing for our zine for Zine Quest 4. It is a zine called Imposter Syndrome. It is a bundle of some of our creations that we're putting together, and what we'd really like to do is we want to make a zine for Zine Quest 4 that sort of creates a little community and creates maybe little discussions about these things, about some of the things we're creating. So in this first live stream, we are going to talk about Imposter Syndrome, our Kickstarter, and some of the ideas we want to put in there. And
introduce you to us, of course,
and
for anyone who doesn't know us.
Of course, yeah, fair.
I'm Red, also known as Cassie. And then, of course, I have my co-creator, Nixon. Thank you so much for joining us. This is, of course, like you said, a bundle of ideas, and Nixon here has a bunch on game design. Were there any in particular you wanted to talk about today?
Yes, so another thing I'm very excited about for this zine is I'm hoping that it will give me a chance to connect with people that are interested in some of the game design ideas and concepts that I have. And so especially some of the game design framework ideas and agnostic building blocks, let's say. I'm very excited to share some of those concepts with people and to hopefully get feedback from them.
What do you mean by agnostic building block?
Okay, so that's a good point. So it sounds kind of funny, but part of it is just naming some of the things that we have. So at a low level, you have like HP, right? Hit points. It's just a number. Right? That usually counts from some number above 0 down to 0. And even in some games, it can go below 0, right?
Right.
Not that interesting, but in a sense, part of these building blocks are saying, okay, well, we call that a counter. It counts. It has a range from -10 to, I guess it's unbounded usually in many games. Got it. Beginning by having and developing a vocabulary to talk about games easily and quickly, about a lot of games.
Right.
I think between that and then with the building blocks, it's taking it a step further and saying, okay, this is like a pattern you can use in a game. So an example of that, one that I was working on, I'm excited about, is something called the hub pattern, is what I call it. And this is very common in video games, but I don't see it as much in things like role-playing games. But for example, you have, so here's one example. Say
give it to me.
You live on a sort of aircraft carrier type ship because you fly seaplanes, and there are you live on in an area of very disconnected islands with large blue water swaths between them.
Yep.
So you're seaplane pilots, and you live on this big ship that has your planes on it, right? So it has to be big enough to have your planes. But while you're there, you live there. You go to the cantina and eat. Somebody has to drive the ship. Somebody, there's maintenance things you have to do.
Okay, so there's none of that kind of management?
Sort of, but yeah, it's less management. And there's also, say, a library. So one of the things I'm most excited for the hub pattern is we can make it a little simpler. Say it's just you're playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons, right? And the way you would use this pattern is say, okay, you go back to your base. You go back to, maybe it's just this inn you're staying in at that time.
Right.
And there's a phase of the game that occurs then where you sort of get to go through a queue and go, oh yes, that book we found. I now finally get a chance to sit down and look through it.
Okay.
And so the GM has provided what's in that book. They know what it is on their side. But instead of just giving it to you on the fly or just handing it to you, whatever other fashion they might.
Yeah.
Instead, you roll. For however much time you have, you go, okay, well, it's, you're going to have 8 hours. Maybe you're not going to sleep, And so you roll, and so every hour maybe you get to roll, and you get a little more information, and becomes this exploratory process where everybody in the game gets to engage in this knowledge, but also the player is getting to discover it,
Right.
But equally, another player might be somewhere, and they want to level something up, so they're putting time into their sword fighting, so they can learn a new ability,
Got it.
Another good example is if you think of a game like XCOM, where you're going to you land and do missions, and you are in the low level where you play with you're attacking the aliens, or you're fighting the aliens. versus when you go back to your base and you're saying, okay, well, I'm just passing time because I want to research this faster, you know?
I was actually thinking that I think there's one example of at least a DM in 5e kind of doing what you're saying, where people would return back to base and then they would have like a number of things that they did. They would turn in a thing, get their coin for having done it, and then go to a slot machine and turn it in.
Oh, okay,
It's
yeah.
From the Adventure Zone.
From the Adventure Zone, yeah, and so it was like literally like, in general, having...
There was a little pattern in a part of that rest state between the adventure.
Yes, and that's exactly the sort of thing where...
And it was delightful.
Exactly. And so when you say, what's an agnostic building block, I say, well, that pattern, as you described, can sort of be applied anywhere, but I'm just saying, hey, look at this thing that sometimes we do. Now what I can do is I can put it in front of a new player and say, hey, you don't know that this is a thing people do, but now you do.
Got it.
You know, this book can show you, oh, wow, okay, I can do it so that they discover something back at the base, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of a simple thing, but that's a big part of why I would like people's input on this, is because I'm interested to hear what would be helpful for people and what...
Got it. Of course.
Yeah, just what people are curious to do, you know, when they hear, okay, a game design framework, you know?
And I feel likewise, because that's how I'm very curious to know what people want to know about creature design. Because I've been reading about it, and I certainly have my own ideas on it, and I am hoping that a lot of you will like said ideas.
And yeah, so I was going to ask you, so
Yeah.
that brings up a good question.
Yeah.
A lot of what you're going to be putting into this will be about creature design. And I say a lot of, but at least part of, you know, articles about creature design and what you call meaningful creature design.
Right.
What do you mean when you say meaningful creature design?
Creatures that don't have to, but they can impact the story and definitely bring something to the world.
Oh, yeah, like sort of fit in ecologically.
Yes, fit in ecologically, but just make it interesting.
Exactly. Not necessarily boring, right? I mean, I guess that's a good way to put it. You don't want it to be boring.
But it's only as boring as you make it. So if you mention that there's like crows in your world, then go maybe make something, make a story around that. Another, to a lesser extent, meaningful creature creation to me also means that you could point out like lesser known species that really exist here and might need a little extra attention, like the striated caracara and the red-throated caracara, which came up
which
in
are
a book.
birds, right? Exactly,
which are birds. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Just I wouldn't have known that maybe some time ago. You know, yeah.
You know, that I was reading about recently and has led me to want to make a creature based off of them. Because they're so smart and there's a lot that we didn't know about. And I think that would be really cool to get more knowledge about them out there.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I like that too, where to some degree I like sharing these ideas because, okay, so the name of the book is called Imposter Syndrome. So we can touch on that a little bit more as well. Because we started talking about ideas between the two of us, you know, a lot when we started hanging out back. You know, we started sitting in the backyard. I always thought Florida was far too hot for this, but it was surprisingly comfortable in the, you know, a little before evening, maybe, you know, 5:30 when I get off of work.
Right, we managed.
Exactly, we managed, but we would hang out outside and kind of decompress from the day. But like at some point, you know, we just started talking about different ideas and collaborating, and it was just very free. And honestly, to put it sort of another way, quarantine obviously brought us a lot closer. For some people that may not have been a good thing, but that was a part of it. Is, I don't know, our dynamic changed a little bit as far as creation, where we just got to freely create, you know? Right,
we didn't talk about it as often, and in the setting we kind of set it up that we had a social contract basically between each other.
I like putting it that way.
We called it goblin, so we'd phrase things with like goblin, maybe that's not a good idea.
Oh, I see. Okay, so that's not exactly where I thought you were going. I thought you meant in general of what hanging out. We should talk about that. But so
you're the one who really came up with it, so.
No, of course. But we're talking about hanging outies, which is what we call silly. We talk about which is what we call when Cassie and I get to sit in our backyard, which I keep pointing behind me. There's a sliding glass door. We sit right outside, and basically sitting out there. But Where was I going with that? Oh, that
concept is hangy outies, and that there was a yes and mentality that we had going on.
Oh, social contract. Yes,
social
yeah.
contract.
But I guess that's what it was. We slowly over time developed this concept where we would have something to read. We kind of decided it wasn't you shouldn't use your phone. I hate to say weren't allowed, but it was like usually the point was like to read or to sit or to do something. You know?
We just didn't. I think at the time I was like coming off of just having shut down a business, so my phone was like still a point of anxiety for me. So it was really important to have some disconnect time.
Right, exactly.
To try and implement that.
And so that was really good. It was good for me, just to not think about anything. But that became part of the social contract. But then it was like, well, we would be reading books, and then we went to the bookstore to get books, and we were so interested, and there were these like the coolest books, right? Say books more. But what started happening is you go, oh, can I tell you something? It was like, okay, we would like disturb each other from what the other was doing, and then it became just the social contract. Like, no, when you have something to say, you can say it, and vice versa. And we just talk about it briefly, and that's cool, and we go back to what we're doing.
Sometimes it felt like a game to me. Like, what could I toss out at Nixon that he's going to grab onto and will turn into something?
Exactly, because then it got to be about brainstorming and just creation. And so, yes, you might be reading a book. Okay, so one example for me that comes up all the time, and this was kind of early days, was you got a book about feathers. It's a whole book just about feathers. It's a book, I think, called Feathers.
Yes, I'm sure it is. I have it in the library.
But if you don't know, bird feathers are made of keratin, correct me if I'm wrong, which is the same stuff that kind of makes up our nails.
Nails, hair.
It's not bone, but it's like a biological, can't think of the word, compound, right?
Compound.
And so like when you're used to, but they basically, like when they grow feathers, I guess you grow feathers. Yeah. When they grow feathers, they're like little 3D printed keratin things. Yes. They're like so precise and they fly through the air. Can you imagine how precise you'd have to have these feathers to be?
It is, 3D printed essentially.
But that is the sort of thing that you were reading a book that I was not reading. I was reading a different book, and I got to sort of get to be a part of that. Co-learn, right? So that's one of my favorite parts, is that we get to extract. Well, okay. We were talking about why it's called imposter syndrome, and we're talking about hanging outies. Yes. And part of what I wanted to focus on was what we began to do is we began to extract the cool parts of stuff. Yeah. Our brainstorms became, what does that mean for a meaningful creature? Or if it was, something I was reading, this
cool
sci-fi
world,
story.
A pirate ship. What kind of game is that going to be?
Exactly. And it was just, because it didn't really matter what we were making or what, I don't know, we didn't really mind.
There was no pressure. That was really the important part.
Exactly. No, so there was just, I don't know, we weren't making anything. We were just making stuff, and it, I don't know, it taught me a lot, I think, about how creating stuff without knowing what you're creating, as weird as that sounds, right, can be really good sometimes, can be what I needed, and what allowed me to make what I made when nobody told me to make something. I don't know if that makes sense. So that's part of why we want to share these ideas, is say, hey, are these just the ridiculous ramblings of people that sit out back and talk about stuff? Or, are there people out there interested in these same concepts and ideas that might want to talk about?
Are we really imposters, or do we have worthwhile things to say? And considering the amount of time and research that we've put in just over the last years, I don't know. I think we got it. I think we got it in the bag. I think we got some legitimate
that's fair.
ideas.
Certainly, yes. Well, absolutely. I think that's fair. I certainly think they're legitimate. Whether we can convince enough people of that remains to be seen, and I'm excited to find out. But this is a part of it.
Yes.
But that brings me to maybe one of the next things.
Yeah.
Which is maybe we'll talk a little bit about a game called All Else Is Rubbish.
All Else Is Rubbish.
Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we'll get back to some creature creation.
Okay, let's talk about creature creation. Let's save that. Let's save it.
You want to save it?
Yeah, let's save it. Well, because we were talking about creature creation already. I was moving on. We'll stay here, yeah. So, what were we talking about?
Well,
we were talking about some of what your contributions are going to be to the zine.
Yeah. So one of them, in terms of, let's say, creature creation, there was a new book that I've been reading recently called... Oh gosh, it's right here actually. An Immense World by Ed Young. It's freaking great. And it made me kind of rethink a bat concept that I had, which is, I sent you one.
Oh yes, okay, yeah. Let's see. Actually, yeah, we're gonna do that. I'm gonna put my window on it. The cave bat, right?
Yes.
Okay.
This cave bat was inspired by African wild dogs, just because they're so cool.
Hey.
Coordinated attacks, amazing. Of course, the bats, and then pterosaurs, because I chose pterosaurs specifically because I found out with a bunch of research that they have this really cool structure, kind of. It's not the elbow. Let's say it's the wrist. The joint above the paw, where it looks like a knee.
Right, but you can see the yeah. So
right.
well, let's zoom out a little bit and talk about this.
Yes.
Right, we're showing now on screen.
Correct.
What I know to be called a sheer cave bat.
Correct.
But I think it's a different name now.
Well, that's just its working.
Oh, that's
name.
working title, right? But
Yeah.
but tell the people more about what we're seeing. This is to some degree
I think I did call it a megabat of some
a
kind.
megabat, right? It's pretty big. This is a creature that we came up with that was partly from a prompt. We said, okay, we took the concept of being able to stun a creature from pretty
From
far
sound.
away from using sound. Now, at the time, we got that out of a creature creation book and thought, wow, okay, that's kind of a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
And we're going to put it in and maybe it'll work. Later found out, only very recently you were reading a book, we found out that actually happens. That's like totally legit and really happens. And I thought it was like this fantasy thing, and it's not at all.
Oh, yeah. So, there's a lot of, like, real things that show up in fantasy, and then, find out they're actually real.
Exactly. And I feel like especially with meaningful creature creation, that it was kind of a cool thing to see, because here I was thinking we designed this creature that was so ridiculous, and you were like, oh, well, no, they do that.
And there's just so much cool stuff.
Exactly. Yes. But so the point of creating this creature was to look more at the structure of their body, and would they actually be able to subsist on the stuff in that area, where they are, in these sheer caves. There was a specific type of cave they lived in.
Yeah. But I'm rethinking that. I'm not sold on that
fair.
environment.
I love that. Okay, perfect.
Right.
Yeah, right. It's just what I remember, but
Thank you.
all very interesting things, hopefully, for people to hear about this creature we're looking at.
But I found out, reading this book, that bats have something called, like, terminal buzz, which is, the rapid amount of clicks when it's, like, right about to hit a moth to get the most information it can. So, like, I thought that's a great freaking idea for an attack name. Because I do want to make this into a creature that you could encounter in your RPG world. So that would definitely be one of its attacks, a terminal buzz.
Exactly. Basically, the terminal buzz, as you were saying, is like, so it usually uses echolocation to hunt. Mm-hmm. But it only does that every so often. It's like sort of a tick rate, so to speak. And it's pretty quick usually, but it depends on what it's doing.
Yeah.
But when it's hunting a moth and it has to get right in close, right at the very end and strike.
Yes.
It basically turns it all the way up, like maximum, and as many, like, right, is that basically what it's doing? And it creates a buzz that, I don't know why it's called that exactly, but it's certainly terminal for the moth in most cases.
It is terminal for the moth. They're very good at catching insects, for sure.
Terminal buzz seems like the name of a Pokemon move, more than it seems. Not that it can't be anything else.
I'm surprised it hasn't been already.
Right? Hey, that's a good call. That's a really good call, yeah.
And then, I'm not sure. Do you have any questions about the sheer bat?
Well, okay, so looking at the sheer cave bat, I forgot if I moved that. So specifically, we were talking about meaningful creature design.
Correct. And
so, you were talking about its arms, basically, and so you see the wings come off, but they also have, like, a little bit of, I don't know what you'd say, cartilage, between their, like, in their elbow,
They're elastic.
Elastic, right? Yeah, I don't know.
Basically.
But the idea is this is kind of like other bats, right?
Yes. So what I was going to say earlier is that pterosaurs have this really cool, I guess ligament. I don't think it's actually called a ligament.
What's a pterosaur? This is a dinosaur, right?
Yeah.
Type of dinosaur?
Like, oh my gosh. From Land Before Time. Petrie. Pterosaur.
I spelled it really wrong.
Oh.
I spelled it like a D&D monster, and then I was apparently a knife, and then I was like, this isn't right, and then I saw it was...
Pterosaur,
Yes. Oh man, I was really you can see how much, but okay.
Right,
but from Land Before Time.
They have this really cool structure in their arms that allow them to basically launch themselves. They don't necessarily have to get a running start to take off. Which is just really cool. Like, how does a huge creature like that, hundreds of pounds, take off, right?
Exactly. That was one of the problems we had to solve with this meaningful creature creation, is you wanted to make this bat that was pretty big, you know?
Yes.
Probably stands as tall as a person, right? Or not quite 6 feet?
Not quite. It might be smaller. I'm not sure yet.
But okay, would you say then like monkey size? You know, like just to get an idea of like...
Chimp size.
Chimp size. But so the idea is it is still big and it has wings, but it can kind of, you know, fly. It can manage to fly, which I think is really cool. But like you said, the meaningful creature creation comes in when you go, oh, we've taken this thing that exists in real life and said, oh, that's how a creature would be able to do this. You know?
Right, and now looking at it, I remember I wanted the pterosaur structure so it could have a heavier body, because this is still a predator. But, you know, the bats that we have now that are big are all fruit bats.
Oh, yeah, right.
That
so
way they're still kind of light.
Yeah, exactly.
Or they have to be light to fly, and so they're delicate, and you can't risk that.
Yeah, exactly. It's not quite the same.
Right.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
I'm still gonna do some thinking about it, because I figured with these guys they'd probably use their echolocation as, like, you know, a final immobilizing attack kind of deal. And if they work in a pack, then maybe they don't even need to engage. So maybe I could lighten their structure more.
I see, like, yeah. Maybe they use tactics to avoid engaging if they can. You know what I mean? Like you said, they're a little more delicate, maybe.
Yeah.
I like that.
So I'll think about it too.
Yeah, but see, yes, it's sort of still in flux, but I don't know. In a sense, in my opinion, this is like you've created this, and you can create this other thing, and they can both exist. I don't know. You know, it's the
right. I was thinking like, maybe I'll just make another variant. Like maybe there's gonna be a light variant.
Well, exactly, and I feel like after you created that one enough, you would go, oh yeah, they're just two different things, you know?
Yeah.
There's a song by Metallica called Unforgiven.
Yeah.
And then they did another one called Unforgiven 2. And they just did a sequel to one of their songs, and nobody talks about that. But so no, I'm just like, yeah, just do a sequel to the bad. It doesn't matter. Nobody's gonna be sad, you know. So,
right. And then another meaningful creation thing is like I like to build the environment around creatures, so I was hoping to jump to the paper bees.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because these are essentially kind of a mix between my friendly neighborhood paper wasps and the local honeybees. And this was just a rough sketch of some of the first ones. Obviously, looks like a little bit of both.
Well, so let's talk about what you mean when you say paper bees, right? Of course, the bees aren't made out of paper, but instead, you know, it's a little different.
They
right?
produce paper.
They produce paper. Okay, so tell me a little more about this idea.
Like wasps, they produce paper, and what I've decided is that as these insects age, their job changes. So some of them do produce actual honey, or just enough, maybe some kind of substance for you know, for the hive itself. And then when they get older, they start instead collecting wood and whatnot and making paper, which is usually hung on trees in big sheaths.
And of course, we call it paper. They're creating more of a nest in something, you know, something that humans can end up harvesting, maybe. But of course, you're saying paper, but it's really like a pulpy material that resembles paper, you know.
Yes, and I'm going to try and illustrate this over time, so you get to see some updates and whatnot on that.
Yeah, I think that'll be cool.
Because I thought it would be really cool that what if somebody starts using that paper? And then I took that and was like, okay, well, let's say that happened, and then somebody's gone ahead and domesticated these creatures.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe now they're a little bigger, a little plumper, a little fuzzier. Still pollinators. They're still making this kind of paper material, but they're a lot more docile, you know. And then I decided that the people that were collecting the paper, some of them were, like bookkeepers and stuff, and would make books, and eventually it turns into this cool library instead. Library/apiary.
Exactly, and I like the idea that, okay, you're a library as well as you are I don't know, effectively a publisher. I mean, I guess they didn't call it that, but I'm trying to think of a book printer, I suppose.
Right.
But the idea is, at the very least, you're a paper exporter. Yes. You know, so no, I like this picture of a place of this great knowledge, because there's unlimited paper to write things on. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I like that idea that like there's more paper there than anywhere in the world.
As a book nerd, it felt appropriate. I had libraries. There's going to be a lot of libraries in the future, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, right. I like that. No, we talked a little bit about... Oh, okay. Father Farquaad is here. He said... I don't think this is my favorite song. I don't think that's related to what we're talking about. But I appreciate their ministry here.
I appreciate Lord Farquaad gracing.
Gracing, exactly. You know. I'll take it as a sign of good luck. So we have about 4 more minutes that we're going to talk about some stuff.
So yeah, we can move on. Tell me about
No, that's okay. So, but that's perfect. We're going to talk very briefly because we are streaming again next week. Next Friday, we're going to do another stream talking about the zine, talking about the progress we've made. We're going to have some updates by that point.
Oh, yeah.
Release some content, just more stuff to talk about. But I wanted to waste time as we got to the end of our stream. We're going to finish up here at about 8:30.
Waste time, he says. This is a great idea.
No, waste time in this moment to just
I'm helping.
Yes, exactly. No, that's perfect. But the idea is part of this zine is going to be the initial version, we'll say, and then basically again for the community aspect, I would like to release a game and potentially have a group of people that are interested in playing it and seeing it, and, you know, potentially helping me test it out and everything, you know.
Yes.
And with that said, I am working on a game called All Else is Rubbish. And the idea of this game is it is a plane-to-plane, like, customization and fighting game. You know, we touched on it earlier where you could imagine being a... you know, on having seaplanes that you customize with weapons and you have to fight against the enemy, you know. But I'm envisioning this relatively abstract, but I don't know, somewhat slightly complex game where you're managing your throttle based on how heavy your plane is, you know, and you're able to maneuver faster or slower than someone based on how high you are and the different things you can do.
Would your weight change as you consumed fuel as well?
So I don't think I have seen that that is an effect in many. I don't think we're gonna go that far.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what? Well, actually, yeah. I don't think weight will change, but a good example is you will have fuel consumption based on your throttle, right? Because you're changing it. Sometimes you're using more. Sometimes you're using less, and you're trying to, you know, just get this edge over the enemy. In a time where what you have to do is you basically have to point the front of your plane at the back of the enemy. That's how you get them. You know, you don't have a gunner, you don't have somebody separate. There aren't, you know, guns or missiles or lock-on or anything. It's you have something pointed directly, so the whole goal is you have to get behind them, you know.
Right.
And so it becomes this dance of doing maneuvers and rolling and having your pilot skill and adjusting your throttle and changing your altitude, you know, in order to just get this shot to then roll and see, oh, did you just hit their wing, or maybe you hit their engine, you know, and you took them down and stuff. So I'm really interested in developing this concept and hopefully using some of those agnostic building blocks to show people, hey, this is how you would build a game from these things, you know, and here's how you would make a game just like this, you know, from these things.
Right.
And so, yeah, so that's All Else is Rubbish, the plane-to-plane customization and fighting game. I have a lot of really cool ideas for that. I'm
excited because we've just talked about it, and I want to customize my own plane.
I know. I'm really excited for it. But we are going to go ahead and wrap up here, and we will see everybody next Friday. We're gonna keep doing our thing, Imposter Syndrome Kickstarter. Tell your friends. But otherwise, we will see you next Friday here at 8 p.m. Eastern. That is August 26th.
With your help, we're going to make this real.
Yes, exactly.
Imposter Syndrome no more.
With your support, you will help us, be imposters no more, you know. Finish this project. So I think that'll be really cool. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Anybody watching later, Kickstarter link in the description. And, we'll see you guys on Friday.